There's only 5 minutes left in Mutant Advancement, and there's a certain underrated mutant champion that goes by the name of Nightcrawler that I've been wanting to rank up for the longest time because I feel like he's actually pretty cool. Cooler than people give him credit for, especially with the addition of a certain unique synergy. But the clock is ticking, so let's just go ahead and rank this dude up. Now, I only have the 4-star version of Nightcrawler, but that should be good enough to give this guy a little bit of a test, see exactly how good he is, see exactly how kind of underrated he is, and yeah, we don't have any time to waste. Let's just speed through this rank up, and then we'll get into the gameplay in just a moment. Alright, there we go, rank 4, and immediately going to take this dude to rank 5 as well. There we go, 550. Let's check the clock. Let's see if I got all those points, and then we can get to the actual testing part. Come on, did I make it? Okay, made it with plenty of time to spare, actually. And are you kidding me? Look how many points away I am from finishing up that level up event. All right, whatever. I'll finish that later. Let's take a little bit of a look at Nightcrawler, shall we? The first thing I want you guys to notice about Nightcrawler is that there's no real ramp-up time. He hits his max damage potential very early on into the fight. As a matter of fact, watch the first 5 hits of this fight. I gained 3 Furies, and there we go. I'm fully ramped up. This is about as hard as Nightcrawler is going to hit it for the remainder of the fight. Like, yeah, my damage is going to go up slightly when I dip below 50% health and enter Courage range. And I'm not running the Assassin Mastery, but of course that would have boosted my damage as well. But you can't gain more than 3 Furies. It's kind of one of the drawbacks of the champion, but it's balanced in such a way that those 3 Furies are very powerful. But anytime you would gain a 4th Fury, it just kind of resets the timer on the oldest Fury. And Nightcrawler's damage output, it's a little bit deceiving. If you're only watching the non-critical hit numbers, or only the numbers that are popping up in yellow, then you're not really getting the whole picture. But I'm sure some of you noticed that there's a red number that pops up anytime I land a critical hit. And when I have 3 Furies, that red number is ticking for 1975. And it doesn't matter whether that critical hit is coming from a light attack, medium attack, special attack, whatever. That secondary damage is consistent. And I'm also critting more than the average champion crits. So how does this all work? Well, the numbers that are popping up in red, that's called a deep wound. So a deep wound, it's a 70% chance to happen anytime Nightcrawler lands a critical hit, but actually goes up to a 100% chance with one of the newest unique synergies in the game that Nightcrawler got that we're going to check out a little bit later. And anytime I do trigger a deep wound, which oddly enough is actually bleed damage, even though it doesn't show a bleed debuff on Winter Soldier, anytime I trigger a deep wound on the enemy, I also gain a Fury buff. So these two things combined, the Fury buff plus that additional damage, and Nightcrawler hits pretty hard. Now, certain champions are going to eventually ramp up and take over in damage output, and yeah, Nightcrawler is not going to set a record here for taking down Winter Soldier, but if you think about how effective Nightcrawler can be outside of Realm of Legends, just in a regular questing environment, or maybe you're going up against the buffed up node where you need some Furies, you need a precision buff. Speaking of precision buff, that precision buff is coming from me being in the swashbuckling mode, the mode they usually try to push Nightcrawler into so that he stops evading. We'll get to that a little bit later as well as we get to that unique synergy. Now, there's something defensively that's cool about Nightcrawler here as well. I'm in this swashbuckling mode, which means I don't have any access to auto-evade, but I get down to 2% health, and Winter Soldier's going to launch his special too, and I'm just going to furiously swipe back, and I manually evade all of that machine gun blast from Winter Soldier. I can't do that with other champions. I don't think I've ever fully evaded that special attack with any other champion. With Nightcrawler here, I did this fight a few times. It was about a 50-50. There's a special ability that Nightcrawler has where when dashing back, he cannot be hit, and it's just like a kind of like a super dexterity. So the fight's over. Took him down at 173 hits. I actually had a few fights that were faster than that, but I thought it was pretty cool doing that super evade. So unlike what people normally say about Nightcrawler, where he doesn't really need to be awakened, right? That's how people usually talk about Nightcrawler, because he's already such a good defender, and for defense, you don't need him awakened. But offensively, if you take a look at his awaken ability, he gains a decent amount of plus attack with his Furies. 358 at Sig level 39. I don't think it scales particularly well with Sig level, but I'm actually going to max this guy out right now, and we'll just see what happens. So let's go ahead and pop this +5, and we'll take a little look. 364. Okay, so yeah, not a lot from that +5, but let's go ahead and put him 46, and then we'll just go ahead and fully max out this Nightcrawler. We're going all in. I want to see exactly how good Nightcrawler can be at max SIG ability level, if the game servers will let me. Come on. Oh, did it work? Were we in? Okay. Alright, SIG 99. What are we at here? Okay, so plus 405. So that's not a huge increase from where he was at low SIG level. So, okay, I don't think Nightcrawler needs to be a high SIG level. That might change for a 5-star champion or a 6-star, but at least for the 4-star, not a huge deal. The mastery build I was using for this little playtest with Nightcrawler is just my normal mastery build that I've been using for my other champions for a while now, which does include the full suicide masteries. When it comes to Nightcrawler, though, I think it's better to play Nightcrawler without suicides. Yeah, you gain plus 60% attack here, but it's not as noticeable with Nightcrawler as it is with other champions, because Nightcrawler already has a way built into his abilities to modify his attack. So you're not going to see a 60% damage increase, you're just going to see, 60% increase on your base attack, but again, that's already being modified. So I don't think it's worth the trade-off here. I don't think it's worth sacrificing your health with recoil and, of course, taking that bleed and poison damage throughout the fight. The only way that I'd recommend running suicides with Nightcrawler is if you're going for a Legends run, or if you are using other champions that benefit from suicides, and you only have to use Nightcrawler for, a fight or two or something like that, where the loss of health doesn't really matter all that much. The rest of my mastery build here, again, it's just a standard build that I've been using for a little while now. Not going to go into a lot of detail about it. I will have a separate video posted in the next day or two going into detail about exactly why I have points in all of the masteries that I do have points in. Let's go check out some synergy teams. This is the synergy setup that I was using to take down Winter Soldier in this video. And although I did find this team to be slightly faster at taking down Winter Soldier than some of the other synergy setups that I'm going to show you in just a moment, I don't like this synergy setup. It's not a very well-balanced team, and it's also not very interesting. So I will show you guys some more interesting options in just a moment, but we got to start somewhere, so let's go ahead and break down this team to get us started. So real quick, the bottom 3 champions, they're there just as a little bit of a stat increase. These are champions that, if you're familiar with pairing up synergies at all, you're probably familiar with the mutant synergy team, especially that of Cyclops, Magneto, and Wolverine. And the reason why these champions are so common is they just give you a nice, well-rounded boost to your offensive stats. So you gain a little bit of plus attack, some crit damage, some crit chance, some more plus attack, some more crit chance, and some more crit damage. You get 2 of each of them. And yeah, it's hard to top these synergies if you have 3 open slots, if you don't have any other unique synergies that you can throw on the team. The only other bonus that this team gets for having those champions on it is you have plus 5% perfect block here. And then there's a bonus that Havok gets with Cyclops, but because this video is not about Havok, we're just going to go ahead and not talk about that and ditch all of those champions at the bottom of the list there. And let's just get into the real unique synergy here, the synergy that makes Nightcrawler much more fun to play than without it, in my opinion at least. So there's 2 parts to this synergy. The first part is that you begin the fight in swashbuckling mode. Normally you start out the fight in the other mode that causes Nightcrawler to auto-evade like crazy. And normally that's fine. You just dash back, you hold block for a couple seconds, you switch yourself into swashbuckling mode. Now you're hitting a little bit harder, or really just critting more frequently, because swashbuckling mode, it does 2 things. One, it takes away your chance to auto-evade. You have 0% chance to auto-evade. And then it also gives you a precision buff that gives you a nice increase to your crit chance. So you're not exactly hitting harder, you're just more frequently critting, which is basically the same thing. But the best part about it, really, for me, is just you're no longer auto-evading. I hate playing champions that auto-evade, especially with the frequency of Nightcrawler. And, I try to switch him manually myself, but half the time I can't even do it. I'll dash back, I'll hold block, and the enemy will dash at me, and instead of Nightcrawler just sitting there blocking like I would with other champions, he auto-evades. He auto-evades, I try again, same thing happens. Eventually I get backed up against the wall. The enemy starts throwing heavy attacks. I can't, it's just a nightmare. I hate it. It just makes me not want to play Nightcrawler, no matter how good he possibly was at the time, right? But with this synergy, you start out in swashbuckling mode, so you have that extra crit chance. There's no auto evade. Life is good. In addition to that, the Deep Wound ability that Nightcrawler has, which normally is a 70% chance to trigger on your critical hits, gets boosted by 30% and is now a 100% chance. Now, Deep Wound, if you remember, it does two things. Number one, it causes that secondary damage to show up, that bleed damage that pops up in red every time you land a critical hit. And that's also what is triggering your Furies. So now that you're triggering more Deep Wounds, you're more consistently keeping up your Furies. Your overall damage output, just on any of your attacks, is elevated. And you're also triggering more of the secondary damage from the Deep Wounds. So yeah, your damage increases in two different ways. You're no longer auto-hitting, and Nightcrawler is now a beast. So this is really the only synergy that you actually need, in my opinion at least, to play Nightcrawler. You can play him without the synergy if you're nuts, but I'm not going to be doing that myself. So let's find some other synergies that work well with these guys then, huh? So Nightcrawler, if we take a look at his hashtags here, he is a hashtag hero, and anytime I see that, I'm like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and get Nick Fury on the team. This will give me a different class type. It'll give a 10% attack boost. That 10% attack boost is not such a big deal because it's only your base attack, and you know, like I said when we were talking about the masteries, you already gained so much plus attack from the Furies. But hey man, 10% attack is 10% attack. If we can get it for free and don't have to suffer any drawback like with the suicides, we'll take it. So we got that going, and then there's another synergy here with Nick Fury, and I think you have to have at least a 4-star version with Nick Fury to gain access to this one, if I'm not mistaken. It's called Contingency Plan, and if Nick is alive, all Fury buffs have 20% increased duration. So if you remember back from the fight I showed you, you know, for the most part, it wasn't that bad to keep up the Furies, and I had a pretty good uptime of having 3 Furies pretty much throughout the entire fight. But there were times where the Furies were dropping off, and I would go even down to 0 Furies, and just having this synergy is just going to, you know, keep it a little bit more consistent with keeping those Furies up, which of course is going to increase my overall damage output. It's not the biggest deal to have, it's not required at all by any means, but it's nice to have, especially if we can throw another good champion on the team, like the new Captain Marvel here, Captain Sparkles. And I looked around at the other champions here, tried throwing them on the team, and you know, I didn't really find any good synergies. They're mostly defensive ones, so we're not really going to talk about that. Let's just go ahead and put Captain Sparkles back in the team. Might as well just go with the best champion of the bunch if none of the other ones are going to have any other good synergies. So let's look at the team now. You know, now not only do we have Nightcrawler on our team, but we have 3 other good champions surrounding Nightcrawler. These aren't just for synergy champions. They're also powerful champions in their own right. And we have 3 different class types, so we're looking pretty good. Where do we go from there? Well, this is going to depend on the type of content that you're targeting as for that final 5th slot. If you're going for a Legends run, which I think is doable with Nightcrawler, then you're going to want this synergy right here, where for the first 10 seconds of the fight, your crit rating is doubled. And Nightcrawler, that's where all of his damage comes from, is when you land these critical hits. So I think it's doable. I don't know if Nightcrawler is exactly, you know, the best champion to go for a Legends run, but I do think it's doable with Nightcrawler. And either of these champions is fine. Neither of them provides any additional buff over the other. Just throw in whichever one and get yourself that additional crit rating for the first 10 seconds of the fight. You could also choose to throw in a different synergy here from Nick Fury. If you want to take the more sustainable approach, if you're running suicides, you can run the Restoration Kit Mastery, or I'm sorry, Synergy. Or even if you're not running suicides, if you're just going up against like a bleed path or something like that, you could certainly do that. Or you know, you could throw on any number of these synergies here. You also don't need to go with one of these synergies. You could choose to go with a little bit of an increased damage output just overall for your team. There's not that many good options with these champions here. I found Juggernaut to be basically the best one, which is a little bit sad because, you know, it's Juggernaut. But hey, at least it's another class type. Now you got 4 class types on the team, and yeah, you've got a little bit of extra crit damage. More than likely, though, what you're going to do with that final slot is just put whoever you want there, right? You can choose whatever top champion you have. You can maybe throw on someone like Gladiator Hulk if you're going up against Starburst, or you need the utility of Void, or Captain Beardo just because he's Captain Beardo. Whatever you want to do with that 5th and final slot is up to you. Seriously though, how awesome does this team setup look? This is a pretty unusual team. 5 champions that are not normally seen together. Yeah, some of it is just because, you know, it's kind of hard to get some of these newer champions, especially as 5 or 6 stars at this point. But, man, if you have all these champions, I think this could be a pretty good change of pace, something pretty fun to use outside of the normal setups that we've been seeing with some of the more common top champions out there. I certainly wish that I had a 5 or 6 star Nightcrawler after testing this guy a little bit more. But that is going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about seeing Nightcrawler in action here, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.